Okay, this one is about no treaty power internally. This is Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, Constitution for the United States of America. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation. And Congress, as the legislative authority for the District of Columbia, has signed on to the United Nations Charter. Congress, as the legislative authority for the District of Columbia, has signed on to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And Congress, as the legislative authority for the District of Columbia, has signed on to the UNIDROIT Treaty. And all of this is unconstitutional. This is Metropolitan Railroad Company versus District of Columbia, 1889, U.S. Supreme Court. Congress is the supreme legislative body of the District of Columbia. District of Columbia is a municipal corporation and not a department of government or sovereignty. And while in sense it may be called a state, it is such in a very qualified sense. So they don't have authority to be signing on to anything. This is the Uniform Commercial Code, which they signed on to too as well, or they passed. This is located at 77 Stat 630, Public Law 88-243, in paragraph or section 9.307, paragraph H. It says United States is located in the District of Columbia. So when they're talking about United States, really that's District of Columbia. They're fraud. Okay, that's a fraud. They're being deceptive. Okay, that's a fraud. They're liars. They're Satanists. Why should that be a surprise? Okay, so this is Article 6, Clause 2, Constitution for the United States of America. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of the state to the contrary notwithstanding. And so actually this is something that needs to be put in every lawsuit, that international covenant on civil and political rights is unconstitutional. Congress signed onto it as DC for DC only, and has no business. It's not a treaty, and they don't have any authority. Anyways, what this is saying is that which shall be made under the authority of the United States. Okay, so this is not done. None of that stuff is done under the authority of the United States. Okay, it's DC and the territories. The United Nations Charter was not ratified under the authority of the United States. The UNIDROIT Treaty was not ratified under the authority of the United States. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was not ratified under the authority of the United States. Anything to do with the UN applies only to their criminally converted U.S. citizens, Sestake Trust slave. And this is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So we're going to be talking about that. This is Article 1, Clause 1. All peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic and social cultural development. Okay, so this whole International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights is really a fraud. They're trying to make it look like all of the protections that are guaranteed by the Constitution, but really it means nothing. And so they basically assault all these people all over the planet based on this fraud. Anyways, so Article 1, Clause 1 is what we talked about there. Article 1, Clause 3, the state parties to the present covenant, including those having responsibility for the administration of non-self-governing and trust territories, shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect that right in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations. Well, so the right of self-determination is to freely determine your political status. Okay, that's very important. Okay, even under their wannabe charter, their civil rights. Okay. Article 2, Clause 1, each state party to the present covenant undertakes to respect and ensure all individuals within its territory and subject to its jurisdiction the rights recognized in the present covenant without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. So this is all Roman law, okay? Roman law, civil law. And birth or other status. Status is something under Roman law, okay? At common law, status means nothing. Status under Roman law means everything. This is Article 2, Clause 3. Each state party to the present covenant undertakes to ensure that any person whose rights or freedoms as herein recognized are violated shall have an effective remedy, notwithstanding that the violation has been committed by persons acting in an official capacity, to ensure that any person claiming such a remedy shall have his right thereto determined by competent judicial, administrative, or legislative authorities, or by any other competent authority provided for by the legal system of the state. And to develop the possibilities of judicial remedy, and then to ensure that the competent authorities shall enforce the remedies when granted. And that's Article 2, Clause 3. And this is Article 3. State parties to the present covenant undertake to ensure the equal right of men and women in the enjoyment of all civil and political rights. So that brings in, basically at common law, the woman is the property of the man, and so therefore the woman doesn't have to deal with these Satanists. Well, right here, basically that's where they get away with assaulting women too. This is Article 6. Every human being. It's interesting to note that they use the states, all peoples. Okay. And here it's talking about every human being has the inherent right to life. This right shall be protected by law. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his life. And then no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel and inhuman degrading treatment or punishment. In particular, no one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. That's Article 7. No torture or cruel and inhuman treatment. Article 8. No one shall be held in slavery. Slavery and the slave trade in all their forms shall be prohibited. No one shall be held in servitude. So you got to volunteer. You got to agree. No one shall be required to perform forced or compulsory labor. You got to volunteer. And this is Article 9. Everyone has the right to liberty and security of person. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest or detention. No one shall be deprived of his liberty. Except on such grounds and in accordance with such procedures as established by law. Anyone who is arrested shall be informed at the time of arrest of the reasons of the arrest. Anyone arrested or detained in a criminal charge shall be brought promptly before a judge or other officer authorized by law. So these are all things that even in their system that rights that you have. And now I don't like asserting those rights, but anyone, okay, so under their system, anyone, even in their system, you have certain rights, okay? Anyone who is deprived of his liberty by arrest or detention shall be entitled to take proceedings before a court. Anyone who's been a victim of unlawful arrest or detention shall have an enforceable right of compensation. And so, Article 12, no one shall be imprisoned merely on the ground of inability to fulfill a contractual obligation. That means no debtors' prisons. Article 14, International Covenant on Civil or Political Rights. All persons, okay, so now we're talking this, they do talk about persons, okay, and they use persons because that's what it applies to, is persons. But so then when they're saying everyone and they're saying persons, I mean, they're talking about two different groups of people. All persons shall be equal before the courts. Everyone charged with a criminal offense shall have the right to be presumed innocent. In the determination of any criminal charge against him, everyone shall be entitled to minimum guarantees and not to be compelled. I mean, there's a bunch of them. But the one that I thought was interesting is not to be compelled to testify against yourself or to confess guilt. In the case of juvenile persons, they had a bunch of stuff. Everyone convicted of a crime shall have the right to his conviction and sentence being reviewed. In other words, the Court of Appeals. Okay, it's all kangaroo courts. Okay, it's all Admiralty. This is all Roman law. When a person has by final decision been convicted of criminal offense, okay, no one shall be liable to be tried or punished again for an offense, okay, so no double jeopardy. These are all things that are provided for in the Constitution, actually, except that it's only applied to for persons and for fictions and that kind of stuff. That's Article 14. And it goes on, this is Article 14, paragraph 1. Well, it must be something else. Maybe that's 15. No one shall be held guilty of any criminal offense on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a criminal offense under the law at the time it was committed. Okay, so no ex post facto law. Everyone shall have the right to recognition anywhere as a person before the law. Okay, so there you go. They assault you with their person. Right here is where they assault you with their person. Okay, and that's Article 16. Article 17, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference in the privacy, family, home, or correspondence, or to unlawful attacks on his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. Okay, this is free speech. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression, free speech. Any propaganda for war shall be prohibited. Obviously, they ignore that one. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of association. Okay, so freedom of association. These are all things that are found in Article 1, an amendment, all the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The family is the neutral and fundamental group of society entitled to protection by the society and the state. The right of men and women of marriageable age to marry. Okay, so they're talking marriage. And no marriage shall be entered into without free and full consent of the intending spouses. That's Article 23. That's interesting to note that Warren Jeffs, that polygamist in Utah that they put in jail, I mean, that was the argument, as they were saying there was no consent. And so they put him in jail. Every child, this is Article 24, Clause 2, Clause 1 and 2, actually. Every child shall have, without discrimination as to race, color, sex, language, religion, national origin, property, or birth, the right to such measures of protection as are required by his status as a minor. Okay, these are all fictitious entities. Okay, status again, this is all Roman law on the part of the family, society, and the state. And then Clause 2 says every child shall be registered immediately after birth and shall have a name. Okay, so they want people to, they want forcible registration for the fictitious debt. Okay, and so again, this is all talking, this is Roman law. Everything to do with children falls under the UN bail priests in Roman law. Okay, so anytime you're dealing with any of this stuff and you're in court, you need to put in a disclaimer to tell the judge that you're not operating under this international law. This is common law. You see what I'm saying? All persons, Article 26, all persons are equal before the law and entitled, without any discrimination, to equal protection of the law. And then it goes on, it talks about against discrimination on any ground, race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Okay, so this is all Roman law. In some paragraphs, they're talking about persons or spouses or minors, children, marriage, or all persons. That's all clearly fictitious entities. And then other paragraphs are talking about anyone, everyone, no one, every human being, all peoples. Okay, so obviously those words are all encompassing, but they use, these words are all used very deliberately, and so it's talking about different groups of people or more encompassing. Okay, whereas the paragraphs talking about persons, spouses, minors, children are only talking about small groups of people in relation to the other ones that talk about everybody. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights is a treaty which was made by the District of Columbia only. Okay, it only affects the District of Columbia, the territories, and U.S. citizens. And actually, the District of Columbia has no authority to enter into treaties. Okay, they have no authority to enter into treaties. And if they want to enter into a treaty that gives U.S. citizens privileges and immunities, what's that got to do with state citizens? Okay, you got to understand that. You got to understand where it's coming from and how it's happening so you can defend yourself. Under their own International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, everybody has the right to self-determination, which is the right to determine political status. That means that you can say, well, I'm a state citizen, I'm not one of your scumbag U.S. citizens. And you have that right under their own treaty. And no treaties can be used internally. Okay, the mayor of New Orleans versus United States. The government of the United States is one of limited powers. It can exercise authority over no subjects except those which have been delegated to it. Congress cannot, by legislation, enlarge the federal jurisdiction, nor can it be enlarged under the treaty-making power. And this is Bond versus United States. This is a 2014 case. It's probably got a case number now. It's been a couple years. But this is where I got my cite from. But Madison insisted that just because the power is given to Congress, it did not follow that the treaty power was absolute and unlimited. The President and the Senate lacked the power to dismember the empire. For example, because the exercise of the power must be consistent with the object of the delegation. The object of treaties in Madison's often repeated formulation is the regulation of intercourse with foreign nations and is external. Okay, they cannot use the treaty power internally. Today, it's enough to highlight some of the structural and historical evidence suggesting that the treaty power can be used to arrange intercourse with other nations, but not to regulate purely domestic affairs. And this is unconstitutional. Okay? This is the international law rule adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction, federalizes state civil law, including common law. The rule serves to federalize not only the statutory, but the common law of the state. This is taken from the Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, report of the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, Part 2, a text of the law of legislative jurisdiction, submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President June 1957. This is found on page 158, and this is the same document on 165. And it talks about state and federal venue, discuss the civil laws effective in an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws, and a cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to federal district court under sections 24 or 28 of the former judicial code. Anyways, the point being is that they're using the international law rule, okay? So they're essentially saying, if you think about it, they're saying that the District of Columbia can make a treaty for the District of Columbia and the territories only, and then under international law rule, they can impose their will in Texas. And BS. It says no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation. That's Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution. But this is again the National Mutual Insurance Company versus District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, U.S. Supreme Court. This is basically talking about this international law rule. Anyways, we therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states were not included in the catalog of controversies over which Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. So they assault you with one of their Article 1 military tribunals. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power nationally covers those citizens even when one of the several states, as though the district expands, for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. That's U.S. Supreme Court, 1948. And so this is all about the Sestake Trust. Okay, a U.S. citizen is a Sestake Trust. This is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, Volume 2, under the definition of mort main. We'll read it, and then we'll talk about what some of the things in here. It says, yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted, not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use and receiving the actual profits, while a season of the lands remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy, to be bound in conscience to account for the use to his sestake use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. Whoa, does that ever say a lot? First of all, it says that the Satanic Trust was set up by the Roman cult. Second of all, it says that the courts of equity were under the direction of the Roman cult. Well, they're still under the direction of the Roman cult. And then to be bound in conscience to account to the Satanic use for the rents and emoluments, that sounds like taxes, people. And then it says that the introduction of use and trust is the foundation of modern conveyancing. Okay, that's in 1835, and that's still to this day. Citation. This is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition. This is talking about the Roman cult again. A summons to appear. How many people get citations? I've gotten them. I know other people get them all the time. The pigs like to give out their citations. A summons to appear applied particularly to process in spiritual court. The ecclesiastical courts proceed according to the course of civil and canon laws by citation and libel. Okay, Admiralty is Roman cult. Okay, that's all it is. Citation, a summons to appear, applied particularly in spiritual. The ecclesiastical courts proceed according to the course of civil and canon laws. This is the name of process used in the English ecclesiastical, probate, and divorce courts. Okay, this is all Roman cult. But again, we have the right to determine our political status. And taxpayers are not state citizens, okay? So you can be a state citizen without being a U.S. citizen. State citizens are the only ones living under free government whose rights are incapable of impairment by legislation or judicial decision. State citizenship is a vested substantial property right, and the state has no power to divest these or impair these rights. The state citizen is immune from any and all government attacks and procedure, absent contract. Every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. He's not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow men without his consent. The rights of the individuals are restricted only to the extent that they have been voluntarily surrendered by citizenship to the agencies of government. The people or sovereign are not bound by general words and statutes restrictive of prerogative, right, title, or interest unless expressly named. Acts of limitation do not bind the king or the people. The people have been ceded all the rights of the king, the former sovereign. At the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people. They are truly the sovereigns of the country. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and joint tenants in the sovereignty. The people of a state are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. We are all kings and queens. Do you know who you are? It will be admitted on all hands that with the exception of the powers granted to the states and the federal government through the constitutions, the people of the several states are unconditionally sovereign within their respective states. A sovereign is exempt from suit not because of any formal conception or obsolete theory, but on the logical and practical ground that there can be no legal right as against the authority that makes the law on which the right depends. We, the people, make the law. Watch my jury nullification video. Watch my grand jury video. We, the people, make the law. Everything they do is a fraud. It's all a fraud. They are liars. They are Satanists. Once a fraud, always a fraud. Things invalid from the beginning cannot be made valid by subsequent act. A thing void in the beginning does not become valid by lapse of time. Time cannot render valid an act void in its origin. Out of fraud, no action arises, and any act by any government official to conceal a fraud becomes an act of fraud. It is a fraud to conceal a fraud, and fraud is inexcusable and unpardonable. Fraud and deceit should excuse no man. These are all maxims of law, and any fraud amounts to injustice. Fraud and justice never dwell together. What is otherwise good and justice sought by force or fraud becomes bad and unjust. These people are Satanists. This video is not intended to scare anyone or make them feel like all is lost, because it absolutely is not. We need to know what the problem is before we can know what a good solution is. Congress knows that they're compelling the use of their commercial paper on everybody. Congress knows that all taxation is theft. Congress has to satisfy the Roman cult handlers, but at the same time provide an escape. Congress is full of Satanists. They have to make it all voluntary. So never, ever, ever give up. I know thy works and tribulation. I know the blasphemy of say they are Jews or Christians or whatever, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Ye are the father of the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. But the fearful and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So everything they do is a fraud. That's what makes them Satanists, quite frankly. And anybody that's afraid, okay, if you're afraid of standing up for your rights, if you're afraid of saying something, well, you're not going to do too well on Judgment Day. If you don't believe what I'm saying, I'm providing the sites. Look them up. Find out for yourself. If you refuse to look them up, then you're going to be considered one of the unbelieving, and you're not going to do too well on Judgment Day. Anyways, so I would encourage you to look them up, do your own research. I got no problem with that. Find out if what I'm saying is true or not. By which he also went and preached to the spirits in prison, spirit prisons, hell. It shall come to pass in that day, the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and they shall be shut up in prison, and after many days shall they be visited. So they're all going to hell. It behooves every man who values liberty of conscience for himself to resist invasions of it in the case of others, or their case may, by change of circumstances, become his own. And this is talking about karma. Okay, what goes around comes around, and so we all have to do our part to put a stop to all of this stuff that's going on. And if not, you're going to be assaulted. And what goes around comes around, karma. If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may our posterity forget that you are ever our countrymen. No one could say it better than Samuel Adams. When shall it be said in any country of the world, my poor are happy, neither ignorance or distress is to be found among them. My jails are empty of prisoners, my streets of beggars. The aged are not in want, the tax is not oppressive. The rational world is my friend, because I am a friend of its happiness. When these things can be said, then may that country boast of its constitution and government. We have nothing to boast about here. The streets are full of beggars. The jails are being populated daily by Satanist order followers. The aged are in want. The taxes are oppressive. The government is run by a Satanist in the White House, although there is hope, quite frankly. The new guy coming in, it looks like he's going to be a lot better, but it's yet to be seen what actually happens. But if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned of the sword come and take any person from among them, he's taken away in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at the watchman's hands. This is my effort to make sure that I'm held blameless on Judgment Day. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. I hope you are held blameless on Judgment Day as well. You are now watchmen, and that's going to be determined by your actions. Circulate this video far and wide. I've got other videos, over 240 videos. Bankster Thieves 1, 2, and 3, the Churchianity series, no such thing as a bank loan. Bar Members 1, 2, and 3, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1, 2, and 3. Martial Laws here, Do-It-Yourself Traffic Stop, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Azel Pigs 1, 2, 3, and 4, Texas DPS Pigs, and there's lots more. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating Your Public Servants. I have YouTube videos that are videos of private information shares that show these and other court citations that are available for donation. And this last paragraph is for all the Satanist order follower revenue officers operating in their private capacity under the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. You can put your privileges and benefits up your rectal orifice. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can't accept Federal Reserve notes, PayPal, guest checks, money orders. Send me an email for particulars. If you find this useful, then you need to pay it forward. If you don't know what pay it forward means, then watch the movie. Send me your success stories so I can share them. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email is engineerwin@yahoo. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page, I deleted it because of censorship on the part of Facebook. And my private group, Sovereignty International, is being deleted. My Yahoo private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants, and my Google private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. I hope you got something out of it. Spread the word. We need to put a stop to this. We need to take our government back. I think we've done a large part of that with the recent election. But at the end of the day, I guess we'll see. Anyways, have a real nice day.